Hello, I'm Dennis McCuistion, and if you've watched this program over the years, you know that we have always been about education. And on economic topics, we're partial to free markets over the role of government, regardless of which political party is in power. We believe that personal freedom and individual liberty are best served by markets, and that many of the problems we have in America are caused by ignorance of basic economic concepts, primarily because in many schools, civics and economics are no longer a focus for the students. Now, joining me today is Diogo Costa, president of the Foundation for Economic Education, FEE, a think tank founded in 1946. Diogo is Brazilian, and he's been involved in economic education for at least the last 20 years, including stints at the Cato Institute and the Atlas Network. He's taught economics in Brazil and the United Kingdom, and before he joined FEE, was the CEO of Instituto Millennium in Sao Paulo, Brazil. We're going to answer questions about what FEE does, obviously, what economic education is important, and why there are misconceptions about free markets and how other perspectives weigh on this issue. So welcome to the program.
Thank you very much. It's a pleasure to be here, Dennis.
Let's start with what FEE is, because I suspect that there is at least one person watching this program who never heard of the Foundation for Economic Education. So tell us what it is and tell us why you decided to join FEE.
Sure. The Foundation for Economic Education, FEE, is the original home of free market ideas in the United States. It was founded in 1946 by Leonard Read with this idea that free market ideas needed a home so they could teach the next generation about the roles of free markets and sound economic thinking in policy, in organizing a good society. Since then, FEE has had many products to accomplish that mission: seminars, publications, events, and from the past few years, also online content, so we can reach that audience, but also guide them through this journey for intellectual growth.
Well, it seems like, based on your background, that this is a field of endeavor in which you, I don't know if you got it from your family or you got it from your college or where. How did you get started in this idea of free markets, whether it was at Cato or whomever?
Well, let me go back further back in my past. I come from Brazil, and imagine 1990, 1991, I was 9 years old, and my mom would give me a $1,000 bill. Our currency was Cruzeiro, 1,000 Cruzeiro bill. So I could go to the store and buy a bag of chips, because that was the price. That was the magnitude of price. But when I go to the store, which was near our home, and I get there, I have to pay attention where my enemy was. And the enemy was this guy called the price tagger. Every day, they'll change the prices. So this guy comes with a little machine labeling new prices on every product. And Every day.
Wow.
Inflation in Brazil was over 1,000% a year. So I have to run. If I see him, I have to run and get the bag of chips before he gets to that bag of chips.
Wow.
Maybe I won't have enough money to buy for the bag of chips.
Wow.
When I got home, my parents converted a bedroom in our house into a pantry. Because every month when they got their paycheck, my mom was an accountant, my father was a public servant, they would go to the grocery store and buy stock up for the whole month. So they instead of having just a few shelves, we had a whole pantry that would just stuff with food. So my intuition that there was something wrong with that system, society, right, with that system, right, was always there. And a couple of years later, I came to America, and my sister moved here. And I asked her, well, can I get a bag of chips? And she gave me a single dollar bill. Not 1,000, but a single one. And I went to this vending machine, and the prices wouldn't change, right? The machine kept the price the same for days, for weeks. So my intuition that there was something in America that was very different from Brazil was there with me. But I only really came to that full understanding once I was in college, and I was in law school, which is an undergrad degree in Brazil. My father was a lawyer, my uncles were lawyers, I was going to become a lawyer too. But I started to study economics on my own. And I found this book by Ludwig von Mises called The 6 Lessons of Economics. That's how they translated it.
It's called the what? The
The
six?
6 Lessons. The original title in English is Economic Policy, Thoughts for Today and Tomorrow. But they translated it to Brazil as The 6 Lessons.
So it wasn't human action.
It wasn't human action. The first book, it's a shorter book. It's 6 lectures that Ludwig von Mises gave in Buenos Aires. And I thought it was formidable, but there's no more Ludwig von Mises at my school. So I saw that this book was published by an institute in Brazil called Instituto Liberal. And I was 18, I drove there, and I knocked on their door. I was like, can I find more of this? And they hadn't been published books for a while, but what they did after that was that they had an essay competition. And it was sponsored by FEE, and the prize for that competition was all expense paid trip to New York, where FEE used to be housed, and to attend a FEE seminar. So one of the winners, I come to New York, and that's where I found out that this was not just a book, a thinker, but it was a movement. And the same way that America, when I was 10, 11, changed my mind about, my intuitions about economics, FEE changed my understanding about the world of economics and the world of free market ideas.
Wow, that is quite a story. And so thank you for sharing that story. I have a question about that then. Does that mean that you're an Austrian economist as such? Or did Mises just happen to be one of the economists you studied? Or have you gone sort of down that road or what?
I consider myself fundamentally Austrian, not only because of Mises, Ludwig von Mises, Hayek himself. And I always think that the methodological individualism behind Austrians, but also the emergent order aspect of Austrian economics stayed with me. But of course, I draw from Friedman, from the Chicago School of Economics, from other economists these days, George Mason and other places, King's College in London. So I'm more eclectic, but I think at my core, I'm still an Austrian economist. Yeah.
Interesting. All right, so while you were here at that seminar, did you go back to Brazil, and did you come to DC to work with Cato and with Atlas and other countries, or how?
So I went back to Brazil, but my mind was changed. I wanted to come back and be part of that world and help to build the next generation of intellectual libertarians, classical liberals. So then next year I applied for a Cato internship, and I interned with Ian Vasquez and Tom Palmer at the Cato Institute, and they convinced me that if I wanted to work in the US, I should get a degree from the US. So I went to Columbia University the following year. I finished law school, I got in a plane and I came to New York. And for me was great because I got to have contrasting discussions with my colleagues. Of course, I was like the token libertarian in my department, but it was great. I learned a lot from them as well, and I wrote about Hegel during my master's. That was a thinker that
I assume that what you wrote about Hegel was not overly positive, or am I missing something?
Oh, actually, I think there are some positive things about Hegel. Yeah, when you think about Hegel's philosophy of law, and his idea of property rights and the intentionality behind it and the order that it creates, I think there is a core component of Hegel that is more what we understand as classical liberal. And that was a tradition that I studied in law school as well, the German classic tradition of the 19th century.
Well, FEE used to publish, maybe monthly, a publication that I used to read. I can't remember the name of it. Do you?
The Freeman.
The Freeman, well, of course. And in fact, books, then there were books that were all put into books that said the Freeman about this. I had a whole set of those. So
yes.
For you watching this program, I'm telling you that information, it's still valid today, a lot of that, because it was based upon principles as opposed to just news of the day, so to speak.
And if you go to fee.org, the collection of the Freeman is there.
Is there?
Since the 1950s.
Wow.
And we're bringing it back as a Substack magazine now.
Really?
Yes.
Okay. Substack is the way to go. Now, one of the things that I will never forget, Milton Friedman talked about this a lot, but I think the first time I ever read it was in the Freeman that Leonard Read wrote called I, pencil.
Yes.
So tell that person watching this program what I, pencil is and how important those perspectives are.
So Leonard Read wrote this essay from the perspective of a pencil. He tried to find the simplest object that we use every day and try to tell the economic history behind it. And in doing so, he tried to convince the reader that no one in the world knows how to make a pencil.
He convinced me, I can tell you
He
that
convinced
for
me
sure.
as well. I think I first translated that essay into Portuguese for the first time in the early 2000s. But it was a marvelous story, a journey of how different individuals end up cooperating without a central authority. Someone is just carrying cedar trees from Canada. Someone else is extracting rubber in Malaysia, or graphite in the United States. But somehow all of that comes together. No one thinks about making a pencil, right? The guy driving the truck with the cedar logs, he's not thinking, well, I should sell a pencil somewhere in Oklahoma. But that pencil will make to Oklahoma and will find a student. And so that miracle behind everyday objects is something that Read captured so well, and that I believe that Fee tries to capture that every day, because the world is full of wonders around us. We have a series called Economic Marvels, and it tries to apply that same principle to consumer goods that young people take for granted, from their PlayStation 5 to their Air Jordans to the Big Mac they eat. And all of that is a miracle of human cooperation. All of that is created without a central authority.
Yeah. Well, a lot of people have said this, but one of the people who said it on our television program was Václav Klaus years ago, and I think he was finance minister in the Czech Republic and then became president. But he was in Dallas a couple of times. I interviewed him a couple of times, and one of the things that he made so clear to me and to that viewer was that someone had to continue to teach young people about freedom and liberty and free markets every generation. It just doesn't last if you don't. So talk to us about that.
That's right. Milton Friedman's one of his last interviews in 2006, he was asked in what intellectual battles have economists won, that now it's a consensus. And someone suggested, the interviewer, Russ Roberts, suggested price controls. And Friedman disagreed with him. He said, I don't think we've won anything permanently. Every generation needs to learn that again. And he said, my generation understood that price controls cause harm and create scarcity because we lived through that. But the next generation won't have lived through that. We'll have forgotten. The collective mind will have forgotten about this. And we need to teach them again about price controls, about inflation. Right? I lived through inflation. For me, that was a scar. But young generations of Brazilians, they're like, why don't we just print money and pay for everything? And so I think that sometimes we think that ideas live in the ether and that humanity learns. But there's no such thing as humanity. There's only individuals learning, forgetting. And as societies, we forget. And we need to teach every generation about inflation, price controls, and just sound economic thinking.
Well, it's obvious to me that you just don't understand enough, because we did this program on modern monetary theory.
Oh, wow.
And it's obvious to me that we don't have to worry about inflation. All we have to do is continue to run deficits. And then if something happens, then of course the Congress will do something to balance the budget and slow down inflation. How true is that?
I think that modern monetary theory is not modern, it's not monetary, and it's not really a theory. It's a collection of disorganized thoughts and wishful thinking. And whenever that kind of principle was applied in history, what we saw was the destruction of wealth through inflation.
Well, there's no question, Matt. There are a lot of examples. I was invited in 1996 to speak in Buenos Aires and Cordoba and Rosario, 3 places down there. And the audience was primarily chief financial officers of multinational companies. And they wanted me to talk about 2 things. One was strategic planning, so I talked to them about strategy a bit. But the second thing they wanted to talk to me about was why Argentina was paying 400 basis points more on their bonds than other countries around the world. And I said, let me tell you something. I said, I wrote a book on I'm a recovering banker, by the way. I wrote a book on problem loans in 1986, and the first chapter was about countries who have problems with their finances. And I said there were 3 countries I wrote about: Mexico, Brazil, and Argentina. and I said, the markets have a long-term, I don't think it's long enough, by the way, a long-term memory of what you folks have done in terms of inflation and screwing up your currencies and the whole bit. And so, they were aghast at why this has just gone on for so long. So if you can, I'm not sure that you've solved the problem in Brazil yet, have you?
I don't think we have, because we also have the great forgetting in Brazil, and governments change, and trust is very easy to lose with the population. I think Argentina now has a leader who gained trust by being outrageous about it, and people really think, well,
chainsaws and everything
he does
else.
believe in what he's saying,
right?
So he's going to follow through, and it was very hard to understand how someone could solve the fiscal problems of Argentina and the monetary problems. But I think Argentina now is in a good path. Brazil is not. Brazil is overspending. We have a deficit at 9% of GDP. It's not doing so well right now. And the government in Brazil, for instance, all they know is that they need to spend more. They don't have enough money. They need to tax more. So just finding all the ways to tax things. Just to give you a funny example, our internal revenue services in Brazil, they're looking for just like peanuts everywhere. That I sent wedding invitations to Brazil so my mom could distribute among friends and family, and they withhold it, and now they're taxing me $300 to let it go. That's how desperate that countries can get when spending is out of control and they don't know where else to find the money.
Well, the good news is we don't have a spending problem in America, as he says quite sarcastically. So tell me what FEE is doing about this. Give me an initiative that you guys are working on that tell that person what's being done.
Sure, of course. So we have a journey of initiatives actually for young people. If you go to FEE's YouTube or Instagram or Twitter, of course, we have daily content, but we're also producing more deeper content for intellectual growth. So at FEE.org, you mentioned iPencil. We have AI Pencil, which is an AI chatbot, and you can talk to it about economics and about skepticism of power, inflation, as we're mentioning here. But we also have very exciting in-person programs. So here at this conference, Freedom Fest, we just ran a hackathon. We got together 38 students to spend 2.5 days building AI applications about sound economic thinking, about the freedom philosophy. And it was a very diverse pool of students from different backgrounds. And many of them did not know how to build applications, so they had to teach themselves and teach others. It was very cooperative. And at the end of it, we had 9 applications applying sound economic principles. We had someone designing a Duolingo for economics.
Really?
Or a platform.
Well, that'd be great. I've used Duolingo for French because I live in France now. I'm a lot better, but I'm still got a long way to go. But Duolingo for economics, really?
So they came up with like a small prototype for that. Someone else was designing a platform to talk to classical liberal authors via chatbots. And the winning project was called AI Business Simulator. And it's a feasibility test for entrepreneurs. If you want to put your ideas to test via a series of AI tools, you can go there, and you will tell you a lot of insights about your market, your competition, your products. And these are students, the winning team, or students between 18 and 21 years old. But it's great when you have a moment where students can actually pay attention to these ideas, but they also have something to do. They have something to build with. So building plus attention, 2.5 days, you get like wonderful things out of it.
Now, you called it a hackathon.
Yes.
When I think of hackathons, I think of somebody sitting in an office building in China or Russia or Nigeria or hell, South Florida, as far as that goes, trying to hack somebody's system. That's not exactly what it is.
That's not it.
Right.
It's a funny word, but it's basically a competition. Usually it takes hours or days between different groups trying to build usually software applications. So you give them a problem, you give them time, and they just have to, and of course we have mentorship, coaching, but they have to build something with under that period of time. So it's a competition.
Yeah, what are some of the challenges that you run into in trying to teach young people, or even old people as far as that goes, about the concepts that you're talking about?
Well, one issue I think that not only FEE, but everyone faces is the attention crisis, so to speak. I learned about economics and political science reading books, and sometimes long books like Human Action. But now it's so easy to get distracted and so hard to get someone to really concentrate for a long period of time. And I think for a while we thought that, I thought at least, that knowledge is something you can download into someone. If you just like push a PDF, like knowledge just comes up. But I think paying attention for a long time and grappling with ideas is very important. It's very different from watching a TikTok about inflation and actually reading a book and reading the history of inflation, reading about Mexico and Brazil and Argentina like you wrote. So to capture that attention and to give experiences that are meaningful and that allow students to actually focus, I think that is a big challenge. And we're trying to develop new tools now. So one tool that's in the pipeline for FEE, it's a library of classical liberal thinking, but it's multimodal. So if you want to study Adam Smith, there is an audio version of Wealth of Nations chapters. There's podcast conversation about the concepts, division of labor, invisible hand. You can read it, you can highlight and ask Adam Smith questions, like in the AI version of Adam Smith. There's like challenge place where you can test your knowledge about that. So I think we need to create these multimodal experiences so students can actually pay attention for extended periods of time and really have a deep understanding of ideas.
Yeah, but they're accustomed to quick. It's not like the old days. We didn't have, I was going to school, we didn't have Google, we didn't have internet, we didn't have any of that. That doesn't mean that I was anxious to read long books even then, but there wasn't much choice, right? And today there are just so many choices in how you get to them. Now you taught on the university level as well. I have too, and I find that their short attention spans can make it difficult sometimes to get there. We have something called iPhones. I don't know if you've heard of those yet in Brazil or in Atlanta where you are, but I never let my students use a phone in class. Do you let them use phones when you're trying to teach them this stuff? I guess you have to, do you?
Well, when I was teaching, I tried to bring the phone into the conversation, asking them questions that they could do quick research instead of fighting against it. But now I think we have a bigger opponent, which is ChatGPT. And ChatGPT stays a problem when they go back home and do their homework. It is still a problem because now it's hard for you to distinguish what's being AI generated from what's actually written by the students. So I think these new tools are also important for assessment. So there's an initiative in Europe that we sponsored this past year in the US, and I hope that FEE is more connected with it, called Economics Olympiad. So it's also competition between students, but they have a real-time moment where they have to actually show they know about economics. So I think initiatives like that can assess one's knowledge in a way that cannot be just cheated by ChatGPT and other AIs are going to become more relevant as well.
Well, I think you're right. I use a tool called memory science. It's based on repetition. They use the computer to do it for their homework, not in the class. But the technology was such that I could tell who had done it and who hadn't. And then I tested them on that without that stuff, of course, and it was really great. But then writing the papers, which I had them write, we had something called Turnitin. I don't know if you've seen that, but you put the papers into a system and it'll tell you if they created plagiarism issues in other papers. But with ChatGPT, I mean, when I was in college, we had something called blue books. And now they're bringing those things back, right? So you actually have to write something while you're in class to show that you actually know something.
Yes, and even with our fellowships at FEE, we sometimes ask students to write things by hand exactly because of those issues. But I also think, I don't want to be pessimistic about it, I think the tool itself can be also very helpful. Sometimes I ask ChatGPT, now ChatGPT 03, the newer versions, to make sure that I understand something. Right. And then ask me questions, and you can have meaningful interactions with AI. The question is, we're learning how to use it.
Yeah. Well, I'm hoping that, the students, not just the students, but all the people that you reach will not only learn this stuff, but use it, and then, I guess even more importantly, use it to teach other people about it as well, including their family, so that we don't have to start over all the time with these things. Listen, I appreciate everything you do and everything that FEE does. Hope you'll just continue doing that. I know you're delighted to be with that organization, and we're delighted that you are too. It's always amazed me how individuals with different politics and ideologies can have such diverse perspectives on what most would consider as accepted wisdom in economics. Yeah, different perspectives can be just fine, but to argue with whether freedom and liberty are important goals and that free markets have made that and prosperity possible is arguing against the facts. Join us on social media. Go to FEE's website at fee.org. Continue turning in as we turn on and we talk, as you know, about things that matter with people who care.